Have you ever wondered what a city that never sleeps looked like 1,000 years before New York City? When we think of ancient China, our minds might jump to epic battles, powerful emperors, or secluded temples on misty mountains. But what about the people? What was daily life actually like for an ordinary person living in a city almost 1,000 years ago during the Song Dynasty? The Song Dynasty lasted from 960 to 1279 CE and was one of the most advanced, urban, and lively periods of all of Chinese history. This was a world of paper money, movable type printing, and sprawling cities packed with restaurants, tea houses, and entertainment that ran deep into the night. It was, in many ways, surprisingly modern. And there's no better guide to this vibrant era than one of China's most famous masterpieces, the Qingming Shanghe Tu, or along the river during the Qingming Festival, painted by the artist Zhang Zeduan in the early 12th century. This incredible panoramic scroll offers an unparalleled glimpse into the daily lives of Bianjing, the northern Song capital, which is known as Kaifeng today. It's not a painting of emperors or grand battles, but an incredibly detailed snapshot of ordinary people going about their everyday lives, including merchants, farmers, scholars, laborers, and noblemen, all bustling together. Hi everyone, I'm Amy. Today we're exploring a day in the life of an urban citizen in the Song Dynasty's magnificent capital, Kaifeng. Let us travel back in time and live one complete, ordinary day from midnight to midnight, exploring the rhythm of life not by our clock, but by theirs, following the traditional Chinese system of timekeeping known as the Shichen. By the end, you might be surprised to find that their world of bustling street food, daily news bulletins, and a rich social life isn't so different from our own. It's a living, breathing painting, and we're about to walk right into it. Before we step into our Song Dynasty day, we need to answer a simple question. How did anyone know what time it was? Without a smartphone in their pocket or a clock on the wall, how did a shopkeeper, a scholar, or a street vendor organize their day? The answer lies in a system that is both beautifully simple and deeply connected to the natural world. Instead of 24 individual hours, the people of the Song Dynasty lived by an ancient Chinese timekeeping system that divided their day into 12 large 2-hour blocks. Each of these blocks were called a shichen. This wasn't just a random division. Each shichen was named after one of the 12 earthly branches, or Dizhi, a system that is fundamental to the Chinese calendar, astrology, and philosophy. You might know them better by their corresponding animals in the Chinese zodiac. The day began with the hour of the rat, Zishi, at 11 p.m., and then cycles through the 12 animals, with the hour of the ox, Choushi, next, followed by the hour of the tiger, Yingshi. After the tiger comes the hour of the rabbit, Maoshi, the hour of the dragon, Chenshi, and the hour of the snake, Sishi. At midday, we reach the hour of the horse, Wushi, which gives way to the afternoon's hour of the goat, Weishi, and then the hour of the monkey, Shenshi. As the evening approaches, the cycle continues with the hour of the rooster, Youshi, and the hour of the dog, Xushi. Then the day finally completes with the hour of the pig, Haishi, before beginning all over again. Interestingly, this traditional timekeeping system actually broke each shichen into 2 1-hour blocks, with the first half of the shichen called Chu and the second half called Zhen. This allowed for more precise timekeeping and effectively created a 24-hour clock system, just like what we use today. So how did you know when one shichen ended and the next began? You listened to the city itself. In major cities like the capital of Kaifeng, time was managed by the sounds of massive bell towers, zhonglou, and drum towers, gulou. The deep, resonant toll of the morning bell would signal the dawn, while the powerful beat of the evening drums marked the end of the day. The cycle began at dusk, around 7 p.m., with the evening drum. A powerful drum roll would signal the day's end and the closing of the city's gates. But the drumming didn't stop there. Throughout the entire night, the drum would beat out a steady rhythm every 2 hours to mark the 5 watches, or gun, letting everyone know the time in the darkness. The cycle would end just before dawn, around 5 a.m. With the sound of the morning bell, its deep, resonant tolls would announce that the night was over and the gates were opening, and a new day was beginning. In many ancient Chinese cities, this sound would come from an official government-run bell tower. But Kaifeng, as a massive center for Buddhism, often set its rhythm by the bells of its grand temples. Now, it might seem backwards to have the official clocks start its cycle in the evening. But it makes perfect sense when you realize the tower's most important job was to govern the night. During the day, people had the ultimate clock in the sky, the sun. But when darkness fell, the tower took over, providing order and keeping time for the entire city. The timekeeping cycle, therefore, didn't start with a warning alarm. It started with the signal that officially ended the workday and began the night watch. While the great drum towers acted as the city's master clock, its sound needed to be relayed through the sprawling city. This is where the night watchman, known as Genfu or Dagenren, came in. Carrying a clapper or a small drum, they would patrol the streets and call out the watches of the night, letting everyone know the time and reminding them that all was well. For the wealthy or for official government functions, more precise instruments existed, like the intricate water clock, the Louke, which dripped water from one vessel to another to measure the passing moments, or the simple but effective sundial, the Rigui. But the Shichen system was more than just a clock. It was a way of life, deeply intertwined with the principles of traditional Chinese medicine. It was believed that the body's energy, or qi, flowed through different organ systems in a 24-hour cycle, with each organ having a 2-hour period of peak function that corresponded to a specific shichen. To be healthy was to live in harmony with this rhythm, to eat, work, rest, and sleep at the proper time. So, with this ancient clock set, we're ready to begin. Our journey starts not at sunrise, but in the deep, quiet darkness, as the first shichen gives way to the next. Let's step into the hour of the ox. What does a city sound like at 1 in the morning, 1,000 years ago? Mostly, it sounds like silence. We're in the hour of the ox, 丑时, from 1 a.m. to 3 a.m. This is the fourth watch, the deepest part of the night. The lively markets are shuttered. The tea houses are ghosts of themselves. And inside the city walls, almost everyone is lost in their dreams. But not everyone was asleep. Even in the pitch black, you'd start to hear the first stirrings of the day. The first roosters begin their distant calls. A solitary night watchman makes his rounds. The sharp crack of his clapper or small gong echoing down the empty, stone-paved alleys. And inside the city's grand Buddhist temples, a different, quieter life was stirring. Monks were rising from their simple beds, not for the public, but for their own pre-dawn chants and preparations. As we creep into the next block of time, the hour of the tiger, Ying Shi, from 3 a.m. to 5 a.m., the energy shifts. It's still dark, but now there is a real sense of purpose in the air. So who's getting up at this ungodly hour? The elite and the industrious, of course. Inside the courtyard home of a government official, lanterns flicker to life. His servants bring basins of hot water as he prepares for a grueling day at the imperial court. The Song Dynasty city people were remarkably clean by the standards of the time. He wouldn't use a bar of soap, but rather a powder mix of ground honey locust beans called 皂角, which would lather in water. To clean his teeth, he might use a finger or a frayed willow twig dipped in a powder of fine salt and herbs. Once washed and dressed in his official robes, his morning ritual would conclude with the lighting of a single stick of morning incense. Imagine the faint, calming scent of sandalwood mingling with the chill of the pre-dawn air. It was a moment of peace before facing the pressure of the imperial bureaucracy. At the same time, across the city, merchants and artisans are beginning their own preparations. Bakers are firing up their clay ovens, their stalls soon to be filled with the smell of baking bread. Tofu makers are grinding soybeans by lamplight. Farmers from the countryside are guiding their carts, laden with fresh produce, toward the city gates, eager to get the best spot in the morning market. Different worlds, all moving in the dark, each with their own purpose. It's a quiet, determined hum of activity. A city holding its breath, waiting for the signal to begin the day. And then, as the horizon begins to bleed from black to gray around 5 a.m., that signal comes. The morning bell begins to toll. In Kaifeng, the monks of the Buddhist temples, such as the famous temple Daxiang Guosi, strike their temple bells, signaling the start of a new day. As the sun crests the horizon, we enter the hour of the rabbit, Mao Shi. From 5 a.m. to 7 a.m., the city gates swing open and the city explodes with energy. This was the official start of the business day, and for the vast imperial bureaucracy, it was time to clock in. This was the hour of Dianmao, or roll call. For the officials we saw getting ready in the dark, their day of work has now begun. Those summoned to the imperial court are already lining up in perfect formation outside the palace gates, waiting for an audience with the emperor. For the thousands of other civil servants, they're hurrying to their respective government offices to sign the attendance register, proving they've arrived on time. While the men were off to court or commerce, the women of the household began their own morning rituals. In the inner chambers, away from the public eye, they would sit before bronze mirrors, engaging in the careful art of grooming. They would apply a fine white powder made from rice to their faces, a touch of rouge to their cheeks and lips, and meticulously arrange their long hair into the intricate and elegant buns and coils you see in the Song Dynasty paintings, often adorned with beautiful hairpins and combs. As we move into the hour of the dragon, Chen Shi, from 7 a.m. to 9 a.m., the city is fully awake. This Shichen was also known as Shi Shi, or eating time. And it is here that the Song Dynasty truly shines in a way that feels surprisingly modern. Forget a quiet, simple breakfast at home. The booming economy and dense urban population of the Song gave rise to one of the world's first and most vibrant street food cultures. For the average city dweller, breakfast was an affair of the street. The air would be thick with the steam and delicious smell from countless food stalls and small eateries. Imagine this: a government clerk hops out of his office for a bowl of piping hot noodle soup, a tangbing. A merchant grabs a freshly fried dough stick, or youtiao, to dip into a warm bowl of soy milk. A family might gather around a small table for hearty rice congee, savory fried pancakes, or fluffy baked sesame cakes called shaobing. The variety was staggering, and it meant that people from all walks of life started their day with a hot, cheap, and delicious meal. But the morning routine didn't end with food. After grabbing a bite, you could stop by a vendor and pick up the day's news. Thanks to the Song Dynasty innovation of movable typing printing, information was more accessible than ever. People would buy xiaobao, small printed bulletins, that were essentially the world's first commercial newspapers. These were not official newspapers, but were instead unofficial publications. They contained political news, social gossip, and reports from the distant provinces. A citizen of Kaifeng could stand on a street corner enjoying their breakfast while reading about the latest happenings in the empire. This was a daily ritual, just like grabbing a coffee at Starbucks and scrolling through the news on your phone today. The morning rush is over, and the breakfast stalls are quieting down. The people of Kaifeng were ready to face the day. We're in the hour of the steak, 4时, from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m., and the city has settled into a steady, productive hum. This is the engine room of the day. And an empire of nearly 100 million people doesn't run itself. Inside the sprawling government offices, the day's real work is underway. The emperor has finished his morning court session. Officials are back at their desks, putting his will into action. Imagine endless corridors filled with clerks, with the whispers and scratches of brushes on paper, drafting decrees, calculating taxes. Elsewhere in the city, school is in session. In a private school, or 私塾, the air would be filled with the chanting of young boys, swaying back and forth as they recited Confucian classics from memory. It was grueling, repetitive work, all done under the watchful eye of a very strict tutor. But this was the only path to passing the imperial exam, and one day landing your own seat in a government office. But the city's productivity wasn't just in the public squares and government halls. Back in the home, the women of the household commanded their own domain. A wealthy woman might spend her late morning by a sunlit window, completely absorbed in her embroidery. And this wasn't just a simple hobby. Song Dynasty silk embroidery was a world-class art form, her nimble fingers creating breathtaking scenes with threads finer than human hair. Then there were the artisans, the lifeblood of the city's economy, the ring of a blacksmith's hammer, the quiet spin of a potter's wheel, the meticulous carving of a woodworker, the focused work of a porcelain maker, his hand expertly shaping the delicate clay that would become a prized Song Dynasty vase. But then, as the sun hit its absolute peak, we enter the hour of the horse, 午时, from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m., and the city starts to slow down. This is the time for the great midday pause, a cherished ritual that was about more than just food. First came the midday meal. For a high-ranking official, this might be an elaborate affair delivered from his home kitchen in a beautiful tiered box, called a 食盒, or he might even have ordered from a nearby restaurant, using an early form of meal delivery. A laborer or artisan would have a much simpler meal, perhaps some rice with vegetables packed from home, or a hot bowl of noodles bought from a street vendor. And then something strange would happen. The entire city, from the highest official to the humblest laborer, would seem to take a collective pause. It was the time for 午睡, the midday nap. And this wasn't about laziness. This was science, Song Dynasty style. According to the principles of traditional Chinese medicine, high noon was the peak of the day's hot, active young energy. To take a short nap right at that moment was to harmonize your body with the day's rhythm, balancing the yang with the restorative yin energy. It was considered essential for good health. Song Dynasty medical texts suggest that a brief rest for just 15 to 30 minutes was all you needed. You'll see an official dozing for a moment at his desk, a shopkeeper leaning back in his chair, and even a laborer finding a patch of shade to rest his eyes. It was a widely practiced custom, seen as essential for good health, and it even remains a common practice in China today. Refreshed and rebalanced, the people of Kaifeng are ready for the afternoon, and the city comes back to life. We enter the hour of the goat, 未时, from 1 p.m. to 3 p.m., which has a completely different rhythm. The frantic, high-pressure energy of the morning has vanished. The workday isn't over, but the rhythm has shifted to a much more leisurely pace. For a lot of the ordinary folks, it was simple. You might see people stretching in a sunny spot, or neighbors gathering in a courtyard to catch up on the latest gossip. But if you were part of the elite, this was your golden time to really indulge in some serious hobbies. A scholar might disappear in his quiet study. You'd find him there, unscrolling a long scroll of silk, carefully grinding an ink stick on a stone slab, completely lost in the elegant art of calligraphy. Or maybe he'd be painting, trying to capture the soul of those misty mountains and rivers that made Song Dynasty art so legendary. And in the inner courtyards, the women of the households had their own world of recreation. One minute, you might hear laughter echoing from a garden as young ladies in flowing robes swayed on beautifully decorated swings. The next, a tranquil silence, broken only by the subtle, meditative notes of a seven-stringed zither, the guqin. And you have to hear about this other game they played, 锤丸. It was a game with clubs and balls, and it was shockingly similar to modern golf. This easygoing afternoon vibe would continue right up until the hour of the monkey, 申时, from 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. It's time to wrap things up as the day is coming to an end. Government officials would start to wind down, and drums from these offices would sound, signaling that it was time to go home. As the officials journeyed home, the rest of the city's workers would join in its afternoon's social life. This is when you'd head to the tea houses, the cha guan. More than just a cafe, it was the city's living room, now buzzing with people ready to unwind. For the price of a cup of tea, you could be entertained for hours. Professional storytellers would hold crowds spellbound with epic tales of heroes and ghosts. You could listen to a musician, watch a puppet show, or join an intense game of weiqi or Chinese chess, while catching up on the latest news and gossip. And for the official who left his office earlier, he now steps through the gates into his own private courtyard. His family has already prepared for his return. A small red clay stove glows warmly in the main hall, taking the edge off the cooling air. A pot of fragrant tea is steeping, its steam unfurling in the soft afternoon light. And plates of delicate pastries and snacks are awaiting. This was a moment of peace, a treasured ritual that marked the transition from the public world of duty and stress to the private sanctuary of home and family. As the sun sets, the city doesn't wind down, it transforms. It is the hour of the rooster, 酉时, from 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. And across Kaifeng, the day's next big question is being answered. What's for dinner? By now, the 3 meals a day system was a settled part of life. For an average family, dinner was a time to gather at home over bowls of rice, steamed vegetables, and maybe a small precious dish of fish or pork. But if you had money, the evening was a chance for a show. You might invite friends over for a grand banquet that could last for hours, complete with dozens of courses, fine wine, and your own private musicians. But here's the most modern part. You didn't have to eat at home at all. The city was packed with restaurants specializing in different regional cuisines. Noodle shops, dumpling houses, grand multi-story restaurants. You name it, they had it. And of course, there was takeout. A wealthy household could just send a servant to their favorite spot to buy an entire feast and bring it back, ready to serve. This was DoorDash, Song Dynasty style. As true darkness falls, we enter the hour of the dog, 戌时, from 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. And this is where things get really interesting. The Song Dynasty did something that changed everything for city life in China. They got rid of the mandatory nighttime curfew. This was a huge deal. In the earlier dynasties, like the Great Tang Dynasty, a drum would sound at dusk. The city gates would lock, and you were forbidden from being on the streets. Imagine all of New York City being forced indoors at sunset. That's what it was like. But the Song Dynasty emperors knew a secret. Commerce thrives in the dark. So they let their cities stay open. And just like that, the night market, 夜市, was born. The darkness wasn't empty, it was a canvas, lit up by the warm, flickering glow of thousands of paper lanterns. The streets would be even more packed than they were during the day. A river of people from all walks of life looking for food and fun. The air was just full of smells, sizzling meat on skewers, sweet pastries, exotic spices, the aroma of wine from taverns. Everywhere you looked, something was happening. Acrobats flipping through the air, a storyteller holding a crowd under the light of a single lantern. Intricate puppet shows playing out ancient tales. Shops that sold silks and ceramics stayed open late. And down by the famous Bian River, the scene was even more dazzling. Pleasure boats, hung with colorful lanterns, drifted on water, their lights shimmering on the dark surface as music and laughter echoed from the packed riverside markets. This wasn't just a local affair. This was one of the most brilliant nightlife scenes in the entire world. But even the greatest party has to wind down. As we reach the hour of the pig, Hai Shi, from 9 p.m. to 11 p.m., the energy of the night market begins to soften. The biggest crowd starts to thin as families head home. This was the time that Song Dynasty doctors said was best for sleep, a chance to harmonize with the body's restorative yin energy. The dazzling city of light and sound slowly begins to fade, surrendering to the deep night as its citizens, full from a long day of work, leisure, and excitement, finally go to rest. And so, we've come full circle. We're at the hour of the rat, 子时, from 11 p.m. to 1 a.m. It's the final 2-hour block of the day, but it's also the very first of the next. The end is the beginning. These streets were just filled with light and sound. Now, all of that has vanished. The lanterns are out. The last of the partygoers are home, and the only sound is the wind in an empty lane. The whole dazzling city we just witnessed has faded back into the night. The moonlight washes over the curved tile roofs and the deserted flagstone streets. By now, those who wanted to sleep are sleeping, and those who didn't want to sleep are probably sleeping too. But the streets aren't completely empty. Listen, you can hear that steady, rhythmic sound again. It's the night watchman. He was one of the first people we met on this journey, and now he's the last. He walks his solitary route, a quiet reassurance that the city is safe, resting peacefully under his watch. It's hard to believe how much can happen in just one day. Think about it. The steam from the breakfast stalls, the hum of the workshops, the lazy pace of an afternoon nap, and the explosive energy of the night markets. All of that life, all of that sound has now receded, like a great tide going out. The city sleeps, gathering its strength to do it all over again when that morning bell inevitably tolls. And so, our day in the Song Dynasty comes to an end. The technology has changed, but the human desires are identical to ours. The need for community they found in a buzzing tea house. The desire for convenience they bought from a street food stall. And the wisdom to balance a day's labor with restorative rest. They were answering the same questions we have today. How do you build a life that is both productive and joyful? It's a reminder that even 1,000 years ago, life was not only about survival, but also about enjoying the simple pleasures of each day. What do you think? What part of the Song Dynasty routines surprised you the most? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoyed our trip back in time, don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories. If you want to support this channel and help me uncover more fascinating stories from Chinese history, please check out my membership. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.
Stay curious, stay magical.